What is XBRL?
It is a form of reporting financial disclosures and reporting financial statements where you can tag your current financial statements to the appropriate spot in the software. So in the future, multiple companies can be looked at on a similar basis.
Disclosure tool. Okay, there's software built around it, right? So there's XBRL software that helps put your data in XBRL format and also read XBRL data. So there's software for that. I mean, how much, do you guys have a lot of experience with XBRL, like software? To be honest, I don't really either. They cost money. They haven't given us any yet. Doesn't mean I can't understand it. So what we get to do is we get to look at the raw XBRL. Okay. Anything else? Disclosure tool, there's software. Yeah.
What does taxonomy mean?
Okay, good question. Taxonomy means many things to many different people, but in our case, it's simply, at its most basic form, it's a list of the tags that are available for use in tagging your financial data. And so, we'll get to that, but basically means they actually define the names of each tag that you've used. So for total current assets, it's assets current. Okay? So that's the name of that tag. And I'll show you how you can see all of these tags. Okay. Yes?
It basically creates like a standard of which like you can compare businesses. The standard based way you can.
Exactly. So it standardizes XML tags, calls this specific set of tags XBRL. There are many tags on it. The US GAAP XBRL taxonomy is one we're going to look at. Then there's IFRS. Then there are taxonomies that's related to specific industries. And so for US GAAP, you have to file regular US GAAP taxonomy, you also have to use your industry extension taxonomy. In IFRS, you don't have to use extension, but US GAAP you do. Even if you don't change anything to, extensions allow you to create your own tags, because sometimes the taxonomy doesn't represent data very well. So you can create your own tags, and you tell the SEC what those tags mean, including the extension taxonomy. You don't have to do that, but you still have to file an extension taxonomy. Because they do other things other than just define the tags. They also define the presentation of your data. So the taxonomy will say, this data is related to this data in a certain way. So when the software reads your XBRL document, it knows how to present the data depending on the industry. So that's another use of the taxonomy. Okay. Any other insights into XBRL? Yes.
Data entering the origin and you change it, it automatically changes the URL.
So is that an XBRL feature? Oh, really? You mean the first one? Okay, then it must be true. Well, what she said was you only change the data once and then the change propagates throughout the system. And that's sort of a feature of also relational databases. You don't have to enter data once. So it's a feature of all the electronization of our data. Okay. Well, let's go into the basics a little bit. XBRL is an instantiation of XML. XML stands for Extensible Markup Language. It's designed to transport data just like XBRL is. So we're sending data with these tags that describe what the data means. Okay? So let's do an example XML. A note or an email, we'll just call it a note. How many of you wrote a note to a friend once? Hang about 40%. So, all right. Well, thank you for raising your hand, Katerina. So, what were the features of this note? You had a title. What was the title of your note? The note. Okay. Your note had a title. What else did it have? So title, body, what else?
Signature.
Like a draft or somebody.
Header.
This was a general note to the public, like you put on Craigslist. Note to the, or was this for somebody? Was it? I don't know. When you write your notes, do you specify? So, 2. So your note, who was it? It was? In class? In my class? Yeah, I have to know. Let's read it. Okay, is that it? 2, title, body? Signature? So like a front. Okay. Let's put it right here. Okay. Is that it? Maybe the date? Something? Should I just like pass a quick note to someone, you write the date on it? Okay, so let's tell me exactly who your note was to. Camille, you say? Okay, so, you know what? I'll put brackets around these later. To Camille. What's the title of your note? This boring class. Lunch. Uh-huh. And what did your note say? Okay, hold on. 2, 1, go. Subway? Subway. There. Okay. And from Katerina. C. And when did you do Excellent. Now let's turn this into XML by can't ever remember if my slashes are right. Whatever. Front slash, back slash. Hold on. Check. Frozen. Whatever. Okay. So, the nice thing about this note is we can now look at the content of it and tell what each piece means, right? And if all notes are written this way, then you can write a computer program to say, well, find the to tag, and we'll put that in our subject field. Find the from tag, and we'll put that in our to and from field. Find the date tag, etc. Find the title tag, and also make it bold. We'll put it at the top. So email is all formatted this way, right? And what we can do also is say note and note. So you can see there's a beginning tag and an end tag for every piece of information you know. Any questions? So this is basically XML. We just made it up. That's okay.
Essentially the same type of HTML.
It's like HTML, but HTML looks the same with the tags and everything. But HTML also is like determines how things are supposed to look. So there's a bold tag, there's italics, there's an href, which will or something to a link to another website or something like that. This doesn't do any of that. This is just what these tags are of information. You're just saying what something is. So this is very basic. And XML works just like that. And it makes things computer readable. Okay. Let's look at some of the features of this, okay? So this first tag is messages. So what does that mean? Everything that comes after it is part of this messages tag until the messages tag ends. So anything with XBRL, with XML, you can build hierarchies of information. So under messages, you can have a note, right? Now another nice thing about XML is you can specify attributes or properties of every tag. So here, they create a property called ID. And you can create any property you want. ID, you can call it unique identifier, or whatever. But in this case, we're guessing that this ID, which the property is always has quotation marks around it. So they're giving a unique ID to every note. It's very useful.
So it's a backslash.
What's that?
It's a backslash.
Oh, look at that. I did the slash the wrong way. That's a forward slash. I did backslash. Yeah. Yeah. So forward slash is correct, but I wasn't going to include it. Okay. So here's a note and who the to. Quote from Jamie, and it's a reminder. Don't forget me this weekend. Now, does Jamie mean don't forget to pick me up from the court after my appearance? Or does Jamie mean don't forget me in your thoughts? We would need more notes to figure that. So then the note ends. And then look, another note starts. And it's to Jamie from Toad. And the heading is a reply to the reminder that I will not. Probably means I will not forget you this weekend. Or I will not listen to you. Or I will forget you this weekend. It's very vague, but they probably know each other better than I do. then that node ends, and then the messages. So there's this intuitive hierarchy built within XML, makes it so easy. So someone named Charlie Hoffman said, hey, let's do this for business data. Let's start with our financial statements and encode everything in a standardized format with tags like this so that we can have computers read the data instead of just people reading the data. So we can do what your friend said, compare companies, do time series analysis, and once GAAP and IFRS sort of line up a little better, then we can compare any company in the world if we're on the same standard. If we have the same taxonomy, same tax. So why is it important that we have the same tax? Why do you guys think? Why couldn't someone just say, I'm going to call mine current assets, and yours is going to be total current assets?
Makes it more comparable for every company.
But who's it helping? I mean,
Financial statements.
yes. So I'm getting to something more technical though. Like, I mean, you're absolutely right. But a technical reason is great. Yes, the computer is now going to be able to read, because computers are very good at identifying if a string is exactly the same as another string. Go ahead.
And lastly would be the end user and the regulator, shareholders.
Right, so there's no ambiguity into what the tag means if everyone's using the same tag. Okay. So XBRL is XML for business data. Almost, tags are mostly predefined in the taxonomy we're talking about. So there's different taxonomies, Use XBRL taxonomy, and tags have attributes that they call properties, like this attribute right here. ID equals 501. That's an attribute for that tag. So XBRL tags have attributes. Okay, so let's give this a go. This tag right here comes from what's called an instance document. These are not they're separate documents, that list the taxonomy, and then there's another document that actually holds the data from the company. That's called the XBRL instance document. So this is from Facebook, their most recent 10K, and I found their current assets, and I pulled out this one tag. So let's dissect it together. And to help me, I will choose Margarita. Yes. So, you think it looks ugly? You think it looks difficult to read? That's because these are meant for computers to read, not for people to read. Okay, but let's try to understand what's going on anyway. So, what do you think this line right here means? US GAAP, assets current. What's that like on our example over there? Yeah, it's the name of the tag. Okay, that's it. That's the name of the tag. So it's longer name than we use over there. Okay, here it says ID equals fact dash DD14, etc. All the way to here. What does that mean? What is this ID? What it is just a unique identifier for this particular tag. So maybe next year they'll have an assets current tag, but it'll have a different unique identifier. So this is the name of this is like when you talk about a database, it needs a primary key. So this is like the primary key. No other fact or no other piece of information in the database, in the XBRL document will have this identifier. And probably, the idea is that across all companies, no one else is going to use this identifier. Right? you know, looks like it must be a hexadecimal code, right? So this is a huge number. I mean, and there's so many variations of that number. It's like, it'll never be repeated. Okay. Context ref is a grouping attribute, so it gives context to the XBRL. Okay, now, what about this? Unit ref. What do you think that is? USD. You said it. What did you say? Yeah. Yeah, US dollars. So it's saying that the number that eventually we're going to get to is in dollars, US dollars. Decimals equals 6 spaces. Okay, and then that's the first part of the tag. And then here's content. And then here's the end of the tag. So it's very complex, am I right? But when a machine sees this, they get all the information they need. So they're going to know it's US dollars. They're going to know that's current assets. They're going to know they're going to report it in, you know, they'll get this number 4604. They'll know it's in, you know, millions. Yeah.
So the machine has a code that's telling it to interpret this in a way that displays it current space assets. So it displays it as current assets, not as assets current.
So yeah, the machine will say, you know, I'm looking for assets current, and when I display it, I'm going to call it
Current space assets.
current assets or the current assets or whatever you want. Or yeah.
Current ID, where is that generated?
I'm guessing that it's generated using something like, to make sure that it's unique, it's got to incorporate, this is just my guess, it's got to incorporate like the company ID, maybe, so their CID number, something like that. So that's embedded, along with, you know, a number of other things. There's one of the very first computer programs I wrote was called, we're creating a GUID, globally unique identifier. So we compute that identifier. We took in like information from the computer itself. Maybe it was something from the memory card, like our MAC address or something like that. We put the date, our location, and stuff like that. And we generated this number that no one else would ever generate in the whole world. And that would be different. And that's something like this. It's going to be globally unique.
And that would be different amongst accounts in the financial statements too, like libraries that are different.
Every tag gets its own identifier. Like regardless of, this is just the primary key for all tags. Everyone gets their own. Okay. So, any other questions? So, there are these experts on XBRL that can explain in more detail much better than I can. So there's this website, we're going to launch 2 short webinars. One is called What is XBRL? The other is called XBRL Building Blocks in a little more detail. So for that I brought these computer speakers. That's a good suggestion. I can ask. This won't take long enough. Watch this. Yeah, you're right. Be a little better.
cover multiple things during this webinar, including
She's
what is XBRL and suggested.
okay. I'm gonna put these up closer, up higher, something. Okay, no one jump. Okay, so these are really good overviews of XBRL. They're not very long, so
On behalf of XBRL International, I would like to welcome you to an XBRL Best Practice for Knowledge series webinar. The title of this webinar is What is XBRL? And my name is Christine Brands. We're going to cover multiple things during this webinar, including what is XBRL and its objectives and benefits. We're going to take a look at the main XBRL building blocks. And then we're going to ask and answer the question, what does XBRL look like? And then ask the question and answer, what does Extensible mean and why is it needed? We're going to take a look at global XBRL adoption examples. And then finally, we're going to talk about additional training opportunities available to you through XBRL International. First, let's define XBRL. What is it and what are the objectives and benefits? Well, let's start with the acronym XBRL, which stands for Extensible Business Reporting Language. And this is represented by an XML language, which is a means of modeling business information that is in a form that the computer can understand and can be used by computer applications. So why should you use XBRL? Well, it all comes down to the new map in business information reporting. And that new map is the transparency equals accuracy plus accessibility plus reusability, which are attributes that are really attractive to business information users. And in addition to the new map, there's a huge benefit to XBRL because what it really does is it helps you streamline your business processes. Let's now take a look at the business reporting supply chain. This raises an important point because XBRL is not just about financial information reporting. This can address reporting needs throughout the entire business reporting supply chain. Let's take a look at two elements of the supply chain. First, processes, and then second, participants. So the source of information for processes comes from business operations, and then that is used to feed internal business reporting and then external business reporting. And then, of course, there are requirements for investment, lending, and then also regulatory compliance. And then at a very, very high level, this information can be used for economic policy making. Next, let's turn to the participants. And the participants may have overlapping needs for information that is prepared through the process element. And those participants can include companies, investors, internal and external auditors, regulators and administrators, software vendors, and service providers. So if you're using XBRL in your organization, that means that you won't have to create one-off reports every single accounting period or month or on demand for these participants. If you have an XBRL system in place, you will be able to have automatic applications that will be able to serve these reporting needs. So that goes back to an earlier point that I was talking about, which is the value of XBRL to streamline business processes. Let's now turn to the building blocks of XBRL. And this discussion is just going to introduce you to some of these concepts. And during the second webinar in this series, we're going to take a look at this in a little bit more detail. But the purpose of this is to give you a little background. We're going to discuss the importance of the instance document, which is on the right. We're going to take a look at the taxonomy and how that plays a role in the XBRL system, Linkbases, and then finally the taxonomy extension. First, let's look at the instance document. And what you're looking at is the Carnival Corporation's consolidated balance sheet. And this is the standard format that you're accustomed to when you look at your paper financial statements. Now, the actual source of this information is an XML file using XBRL tags. So each one of those balance sheet accounts and the amount has a corresponding XBRL tag, which is represented in that XML file. And the XML file then can be used to render this balance sheet in this form. Next, let's look at the important taxonomies. So you may be wondering, where do those XBRL tags come from? Well, they come from something called a taxonomy, which is like a dictionary, and it has a list of XBRL elements that are used for tagging your XBRL applications. So let's look at an example. The IFRS, International Financial Reporting Standards, has its own XBRL taxonomy, which contains financial statements for that accounting standard. So an example, a name of an account, for example, IFRS account would be other reserves, and its corresponding IFRS XBRL tag would be other reserves, with no space between the two. Let's now turn to Linkbases. And these are also known as layers, and this is a way to enhance the information of a financial statement element or an element in the taxonomy that you're using. So for example, looking back at the IFRS example, we looked at other reserves, and there could be a link base to the IFRS standard describing how that should be treated for IFRS reporting. And other examples of link bases would be how we would present other reserves on the financial statements. And another example would be what calculations are used to report that information. So what does XBRL look like? Well, I want you to think barcode. So if we have the phrase, "Don't worry, be happy," the barcode that directly beneath it is the way to tag that phrase to the barcode. And that's a concept that we want to think about when we're looking at XBRL tagging. Let's take a look at another example. And so let's say we have a business information user who has an employee badge with a barcode on it. And the barcode contains the tag with the meanings of name of the person, company name, employee ID number, maybe the security level, job title, location, and hobbies. Here's another example of a financial statement, but this time what we're going to do is add the XBRL tag that would represent the financial account name. So in this case, we're looking at revenues, and we have the XBRL tag in the third column, which is US GAAP revenues abstract. And then the second line, sales, has an amount in US dollars, almost $29 million. And then there's that XBRL tag that's used to relate the XBRL to the financial statement name and amount. Another important concept in XBRL is the concept of extensible. So just exactly what does that mean? Well, extensible represents flexibility in XBRL. So just a few minutes ago, we talked about taxonomies and how they're a dictionary of the elements, such as in a US GAAP taxonomy. And the extension allows the XBRL users to add tags, to customize tags, if for some reason the tag that they need to correctly present their information isn't included in the taxonomy. It's also known as an extension element. And here's a good example. This is United Airlines. In 2009, they needed to add an extension to cover fuel costs because it wasn't listed in the taxonomy. And as you know, fuel cost is a very important element of cost of goods sold for the airline industry. Let's now take a look at the adoption for regulatory purposes globally of XBRL. So we have three categories. The olive green represents countries that are developing regulatory applications. In the purple, we see countries that are voluntarily filing to one or more regulators using XBRL. And then finally, the green examples represent countries that are filing to one or more regulators. So here are some specific global XBRL adoption examples. In Australia, there's voluntary reporting for standardized business reporting, and that means that the Australian Department of the Treasury coordinated with a number of agencies to identify the information that those agencies needed. So a filer in Australia just simply enters the information once, and then the reports are automatically populated for the agencies who are cooperating under this voluntary program. The UAE recently adopted XBRL for the UAE stock exchanges, and that becomes effective in 2013. And interestingly, they're using an Arabic taxonomy for that implementation. Since April of 2011 in the UK, Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs has required that all organizations, listed companies, private companies, nonprofits, and charities file their tax information using XBRL. And then finally, in the US, the SEC has the XBRL reporting mandated 2009, which requires all publicly traded companies in the United States to file their regulatory financial statements, such as the 10K and the 10Q, using XBRL. Let's now turn to additional training opportunities. As I mentioned earlier, the XBRL best practices.
Okay, so any questions about that presentation? So in the last half hour before lunch, I'm going to try and unravel some of the mysteries behind taxonomies and the Linkbases, okay?
I have a question. When United created their own tag for the fuel cost,
Right.
does that become the tag for fuel? Like, Delta would have to use it next year?
No, that's a great question. So at the time when they would have done that, it would have been their own tag, and it wasn't standardized. So which really reduces the comparability between documents, right? Maybe by now it is standardized. That's so obvious. Okay.
Welcome to this XBRL Best Practice Board Knowledge Series webinar, XBRL Building Blocks in a little more detail, presented by Eric Cohen.
I know this guy. I know who he is.
In the first part of this webinar series, what is XBRL? you are introduced briefly to some terms that are key to understanding XBRL today. While sometime in the not-too-distant future, XBRL may be as transparent as the infrastructure that lets you plug in your computer or get a dial tone on a landline telephone, for now it's helpful to know the basics of XBRL. Instance documents for holding the organizational data, the taxonomies that provide the context to understand that organizational data, extensibility, the unique propositions of XBRL for first creating and then customizing the taxonomy. Finally, we'll discuss how all these things work together to help streamline and integrate the business reporting supply chain. XBRL is about expressing the data and assertions of business reporting for commercial organizations, government entities, not-for-profits, and anyone else doing business. Business data, whether the standardized version of a company's financial statement, or their internal detailed ERP data, or corporate responsibility content, that content is primarily represented by the instance document. I say primarily because some of the report or data batch specific information may appear in some of the additional types of XBRL files that we'll discuss shortly. Just as some company reports and data is used only internally or shared with the regulator for simple compliance, and some of those reports are made public and some aren't, the same is true about XBRL instances. At the time of this recording, for example, there are approximately 49,000 instance documents and their related files provided by 9,000 companies filing in U.S. GAAP with the SEC of the United States. Now, bank reports are likewise available for download from the U.S. banking regulators. There are many other regulators around the world, including the Superintendencia de Seguros, the SBS, the Chile, the Magnet System of the Israel Securities Authority, and the Financial Services Agency of Japan's EDINET that also provide reporting information in both legacy and XBRL formats. Now, that's just a small selection. There are many more, and this isn't limited to national mandates. Voluntary programs such as the Global Reporting Initiatives Program join the mandates in a wide variety of XBRL instances being made available publicly, as well as millions and tens of millions that are only used within a single organization, in a closed information supply chain, or in filing with the regulators such as HM Revenue and Customs in the UK. An instance document represents business reporting facts using the Extensible markup language, or XML, a language created by the World Wide Web Consortium to provide the best of content, that's the stuff you need to report, with the best of context, the things that help explain what's being reported, in a machine-consistent fashion. All this independent of a single fixed presentation. By adding metadata, that's the hidden information about information, you often hear that referred to as tags. Organizations that publish their content in an instance document both provide formalized meaning to each fact they report, as well as a consistent way to provide the context to each of those facts, such as when did it take place or what are the relevant units of measure. By standardizing the way that business reporting numbers, pieces, and blocks of text, dates, web addresses, and all other additional necessary qualitative and quantitative reporting content are expressed, the processes of assembling, combining, preparing, publishing, finding, accessing, and consuming the data can potentially be improved. So an instance document is a set of factual information. An instance document can be a single fact. It can be an entire traditional business report like a customer master file or a financial statement. It can even be an amalgamation of information from many sources. Now, each of those facts is associated with certain contextual information to help in interpreting. That includes pointers to the reporting organization, the time period of the reported fact, and certain reporting breakdowns such as the reporting segment or reporting scenario. Numeric facts are associated with an explicit unit of measure, so you know whether something's in feet or meters, in US dollars,